Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. If you've already subscribed, thank you very much. I do appreciate it. And if you're a new viewer on the channel, welcome. My name's Pam. Basically, this is just a channel that I have where I discuss moving back to Ireland after living in the USA for 6 years. I'm discussing different things about navigating my life here. What are some of my potential future plans? What were some of my experiences in the USA that I learned a lot from. So if you want to join me on the journey, you are absolutely more than welcome. I'm recording this video on the Saturday evening. It's about 8 p.m. now. I'm sorry it's a wee bit later than usual. I usually like to record things on the Friday morning and get it uploaded on the Friday afternoon. Um, Ironically, I actually had the week off for holidays. I had the week off work, but it was very intense emotionally. I realized I was burnt out from work, but I didn't realize how burnt out I was until I really took my foot off the pedal and I crashed. I completely crashed, but like everybody, we need the rest, we need the time off, we need to stop like rushing and doing things all the time. So it was a good week, but I'm glad to be back here recording the video for you. And without further ado, the topic for today's video is going to be reverse culture shocks that I had when I moved back to Ireland. I moved back to Ireland just over 11 months ago now. I moved back in July 2025, sorry. Can't believe it's been nearly a year. And why have I chosen so long to talk about this now? In the past 11 months, I've had a lot of things I had to do, like for my health, especially. So now that a lot of my health issues are behind me, knock on wood, it stays that way. I feel like now I'm just in a better place where I can fully reflect and fully focus on talking about these things. So I'm limiting it to four because I have four pretty substantial culture shocks I want to talk about. And let's move on to the first one. This for me is probably the biggest culture shock, but it's also quite positive as well. That is a slower pace of life. Now, I don't live in a city here in Ireland. I live in the countryside, so it is slower. You need to be patient. You need to be able to have the small talk. You need to be able to adapt. That's been probably one of the biggest difficulties, but the biggest benefits of being back here is I'm learning to be patient so much because back in the USA, I lived in Washington, D.C. I was traveling up to New York fairly often. So I was used to like almost the rat race, the zoom, 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 getting things done all the time, very quickly, very efficiently. I had that mindset. And I still have a bit of it now to a certain extent, but I definitely realized when I came back here, I realized I'm going to have to shift my mentality a little bit to be able to integrate more back here and, be able to just settle, enjoy the small talk, and also just realize things are going to get done in their own time. It's not because people want to be slow, it's just because it's the system of the society here. Things happen a bit slower, people are more polite, they like the small talk. Things can take a little bit longer to process, but overall, I think it's a really good balance. I think it's a very good balance, and I notice I am getting adjusted to that more and more. I am becoming more patient, and I'm being less tough on myself as a result. So overall, I would say this is a positive culture shock. Number two is this is especially true in a rural area. People want to know about you. They will ask questions about you. And this has two different sides to it. It has a positive and it has a negative. The positive side, which I really like, is people genuinely care. This goes back to the first shock of a slower pace of life. People have the time and they make the time to ask about you. Like, how are you? How is your life? How are you adjusting to being back here? It's honestly, I really, really loved it and I felt very, very supported by it. Now, the negative. And I think in a lot of collectivist cultures, this can be quite common. The negative is gossip. And this comes down to the type of person. Do they genuinely care, or are they stocking up on information? Because gossip can become very toxic very quickly. We all love a bit of a gossip sometimes. We all love to know information about people, but it can become toxic incredibly quickly. And especially where you notice the little cliques forming, the little groups of people. So I would say overall, I do really like the shock, but you have to be careful with who you're talking to because it can turn, you may think the person genuinely cares about you, but it can turn to gossip very quickly. So that's something I'm still adjusting to, but there's a positive side to it as well. So I'm very thankful for it. And my third reverse culture shock is since it's a slower pace of life, since there's less distractions, like in a city, you do have more space to be you. There's more time to explore who you are. And that's something I've really noticed in the past, over the past 11 months. I've noticed I've had the time to take these little timeouts for myself and just check in with how I'm feeling, how I'm reacting to different things. You know, what relationships do I have in my life and am I happy with them? When you're out of an environment where you're constantly expected to perform, perform, perform to meet a metric, you don't necessarily have as much time to remove yourself from that and just question what you have in your life around you. Here, I've been able to do that. And it's been interesting to notice some of my changes with my friendships and my relationships. I've definitely I've definitely ended some friendships I don't think I would have in the past, but I've also made some new friendships as well, which I'm very thankful for. But when you're able to kind of sort of like if you imagine like the cat wheel or like the wheel that pets run around and they just keep running and running and running. When you get out of that wheel and you can start to examine what you have in your life and what effects these different things have on you. You can change, it's easier to notice and then change these things. So I think that's a positive, you have time to examine like who you are as a person, but also who you want to be in the future. So for me, I have my list of goals I'm working on now, but I also have a list of goals that I've achieved as well in the past 11 months because you have to keep perspective. We're all very strong people. We have strengths, we have talents. And, that's been one of the blessings of me being back in this quieter environment. I've been able to reflect on what I've achieved in my life, despite obstacles. And it's nice to be able to do that. And my fourth one, sorry, I have my notes down here because for me these are big shocks and there is a lot behind them. So I want to be able to tell you them fully. My fourth one this is probably the biggest one for me because it's to do with therapy. And for me, therapy has been an important part of my life for 4 years. I started going to therapy when I started university in the USA back in 2019, a long time ago. And then I stopped during COVID because there's administrative reason. I technically wasn't living in the same state as the university, so I wasn't eligible for that therapy anymore. And then I went back to it nearly 2 years ago. And I've been going to it consistently ever since. And, I'm very happy with all the therapists I've had in the US. I've had three of them. Um, they've all served different purposes for me, and I'm very thankful for them. However, I'm noticing in Ireland it is different. Now, obviously, it's a different culture. There's going to be differences. However, I feel like the approach to counselors, they call them counselors here in Ireland. The approach that counselors have here in Ireland, it's more like laissez-faire. It's more like you do more of the work, which is good. It's good. I do agree that you have to be very proactive. However, I have looked at my therapists for guidance. That's a big reason that I'm going there, is because, I have this situation. I know how I don't want to act, but I need guidance. I need like little tips on how to get me there emotionally. And it just, I feel like the more and more questions I ask about, like, well, what do you recommend I do? I generally get these types of answers of, that's up to you to figure out in your journey, which I understand. Ultimately, the answers come from within, but we need we need to have a method. We need to have the tips to get us, like, to kind of steer us along that journey. That's why I go to therapy. I know the journey's within me, but sometimes I need somebody to help me with the steering wheel if I'm going off the track or something like that. So I think maybe a reason for that more laissez-faire approach, and I'm not a scientist, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a researcher. This is purely anecdotal based on my experiences. I think there's more of a stigma towards therapy here than in the USA. I've I've noticed with some people they haven't responded well. And my approach is, I'm never going to tell people what to do. I'm never going to tell people to go to therapy or go see a doctor if their mental health is struggling. I if somebody asks me what I've done, then I'll say, "Oh yeah, I've been going to therapy. It really helps for dealing with my anxiety. It really helps for, strengthening my perspective, being able to come back to a healthy perspective if I'm having an anxiety attack." But I'll never say to somebody, "Oh, you have to go to therapy." That's that's not really my style. But I've definitely noticed some people are saying, "Oh, you shouldn't go to therapy. Why are you going to therapy? Like, you look fine." It's not about look and fine. It's about dealing with anxiety. It's about dealing with low self-esteem. It's about building a foundation of confidence that I can use later on in my life for future challenges and overcoming things. But I do find that that could be a possible reason for this different approach in therapy. I've tried out a few therapists and I've noticed that's a bit of a trend. I'm not saying that, Irish counselors are better or worse, or like American therapists are better or worse. I've just noticed, I think it's a cultural attitude, and that's why I put it here in my culture shocks, because overall I do believe Ireland has become a lot more open-minded to therapy, especially since I was living here in the mid to late 2010s. It's changed massively, but there still is a bit of a gap in the openness. There's still a little bit of a stigma, um, but I do think that really good progress is being made. So hopefully, as more time passes, these reverse culture shocks will get less and less, hopefully. And I'm going to leave it there at those 4 reverse culture shocks, because I see here I'm coming close to the 14-minute mark. So I don't want to talk for too long. If you've managed to stay until the end of the video, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. If you have any questions or any ideas that you want for other videos, leave them in the comments. One thing I don't like in my comments though is misinformation. So you are more than welcome to describe your personal experiences, but I don't like misinformation. I don't like fear mongering, and I don't like anti-immigrant, anti-migrant sentiments. I was an immigrant in the US, so please keep it respectful in the comments. Please keep it welcoming, and I wish you a very good rest of your weekend. Thank you.